Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take your challenging source stacks and, well, we try to give you the systemic clarity you need.
Make sense of the noise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And our deep dive today, it feels intensely focused, really driven by the personal journey you shared with us.
Yes.
Observing that slow erosion, of integrity in Indian medical education.
And the trust that goes with it
Yeah.
between doctor and patient. It's palpable, that loss.
Yeah. And your journey, starting from seeing institutions founded with maybe charitable intent.
Like you mentioned in UDUPI, where the TMA Pay Foundation began its work.
Right. And then later securing a merit-based seat yourself.
Yeah.
That gives such a critical lens.
It does. You watched the goalposts shift, didn't you? Medical education, which really ought to be about noble principles.
Service, healing.
Instead, it seemed to morph into this high-stakes commercial game.
And our sources, they provide the systemic validation for that feeling, right? This tension you observed.
Absolutely. It's a painful conflict. The noble ideal of medicine versus this hyper-commercialization reality.
It's systemic. It didn't just start in the hospital ward, did it? It started way back.
In the courts, in the classrooms, and policy decisions, yeah.
So our mission today is to trace that evolution. We're going to look at, 3 interconnected failures?
That's the plan. First, the complete financialization of medical education itself, the fees, the legal games.
Okay.
Second, how that distorts the medical workforce. Healers turning into, sales agents almost.
Under pressure, yeah.
And third,
the public health consequences. And they are severe. We're talking superbugs, inefficiency, breakdown in quality.
Right. And ultimately, we want to delay the knowledge needed for the public, for you listening, to navigate this.
To understand it, maybe challenge it.
So, if the system was supposed to be built on merit, on charity,
yeah,
how did medicine make this switch?
From a mission
to a massive debt-fueled business. Let's dig in. Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the legal basics, the foundation. Historically in India, education wasn't seen as a business, right? Not at all. It was viewed as a charitable activity, and landmark court decisions really codified that ethos.
Like the TMA Pay Foundation case, 2002.
Exactly. That was core. The principle was setting up an educational institution is an occupation, or even a mission in life. That's under Article 19(1) of the Constitution.
But crucially not.
Crucially not a trade or business aiming for profit. That distinction was fundamental.
The integrity of the whole sector rested on it.
Absolutely. The Supreme Court was really explicit. They upheld an earlier principle from the Krishnan case.
Which said?
That profiteering and charging capitation fees, those huge, non-transparent, often illegal upfront payments were illegal.
Why illegal?
Because they were seen as opposed to Indian tradition and public policy. The law was clear. The purpose had to be public good, not personal gain.
But the reality you observed, and what the sources confirm, is that this ruling, it became more of an aspiration than a hard rule.
That's putting it mildly. Yeah. Despite definitive judgments, capitation fees just persisted. Institutions, often with powerful backers, politicians, corporate leaders, they found ways around it. Clever ways.
Which is why you kept seeing media sting operations, right? Trying to expose it.
Constantly. And this defiance, this finding loopholes, it made the cost just explode. It's unrecognizable now.
What are we talking cost-wise?
Today, getting a private MBBS seat, you're routinely looking at over 1 crore rupees. Sometimes much, much more, just to start.
1 crore, that's, over $120,000?
Roughly, yeah. Now, compare that to a government college.
Where fees are.
Maybe a few thousand rupees a year, a lakh maximum perhaps, so maybe $1,200 a year at the top end for government versus $120,000 plus just to begin in private.
The gap is just astronomical. It's an impossible barrier for most.
For the vast majority of students who actually have the merit.
And this cost gap, this is what really destroys that original noble idea, isn't it?
Completely.
You highlighted your own experience getting a seat based on merit in Bangalore. And contrasting that with others who maybe relied on payments or quotas.
That contrast forces the question, doesn't it? When only the really affluent can even afford the degree.
What happens to the idea of service? Where does that go?
Exactly. Now, there were attempts to fix this. Regulatory attempts.
Like the National Medical Commission Act.
Yeah.
The NMC Act of 2019.
Yes. That act tried to pull back on the costs. It mandated that 50% of the seats in private and these deemed colleges They must charge fees on par with the government colleges.
The logic being.
Sound logic, really.
Yeah.
If half the intake is price controlled, then merit still has a chance. And the institution, well, it still has to operate partly on a not-for-profit basis, right, for a big chunk of its students.
Makes sense on paper.
But this is where the power dynamics kick in. The political weight, the corporate pressure, it became intense.
So the private institutions fought back.
Fiercely.
Yeah.
And almost instantly. You saw major legal battles erupting. Cases like EPSI versus NMC and Madras High Court. Similar challenges went to the Supreme Court.
What was their argument?
They argued these fee caps were basically illegal nationalization, that the government was infringing on their constitutional right to run their occupation.
Framing regulation as a government takeover.
Pretty much. Painting it as an attack on their financial autonomy. And these lobbies, they're powerful.
So they succeeded.
Largely, yeah. They got legal stays, stalled implementation in key states like Kerala, Bihar, the net effect.
The status quo held. High costs, limited access.
The NMCX mandate on fees was effectively neutralized, left inert.
So, if regulating the fees failed because of this pushback, did the government try something else? Or did they just lean into the commercial side?
They leaned in hard. And this is where the policy shift is, frankly, quite stunning.
Right.
January 2017, the government puts out a notification. It says any medical college set up by a society or a trust.
The traditional nonprofit structures.
Right. Those could now be converted into a company,
Right.
a for-profit company. The sources we looked at cite this moment specifically. They say the government ended all pretense of medical education being a not-profit venture.
That's not just tweaking the rules. That's a fundamental change in philosophy.
It's a paradigm shift. You're not just allowing profit anymore. You're actively inviting investment models that are completely outside that traditional charitable framework.
Who did they invite?
Big for-profit corporations. Think major players, even mining giants like Vedanta. They were explicitly invited into the education sector.
With freedom to set fees.
Complete freedom on fees. And it went further. The amendment allowed consortia, basically groups of 2 to 4 organizations, including companies, to set up colleges.
Okay.
And often this was done using public-private partnerships, PPPs, leveraging existing public hospital infrastructure.
So wait, using public hospitals to support private for-profit medical colleges.
Effectively privatizing public resources to boost private ventures.
Yes. This flips the whole script, doesn't it? You mentioned your father, working with integrity, being motivated to collect funds back in the day.
Under that old philanthropic model.
Right. Maybe like what happened historically with figures like Rockefeller setting up medical schools, rooted in some idea of charity, however complex.
That was the narrative, at least.
But this new model isn't charity. It's about maximizing returns on corporate investment.
Precisely. And the system now ensures if there's no effective fee regulation, only the wealthy can afford to become doctors. Which brings us back to that really uncomfortable question.
If their primary motivation has to be recouping that massive investment,
will they ever prioritize serving the poor or the rural areas, the underserved places where the shortage is desperate?
the incentives are just broken
Mm-hmm.
right from the start,
Correct.
before they even see a patient.
And that shift in who can even afford to become a doctor, which we just covered,
Yep.
that leads straight into this identity crisis in the profession. Part 2.
An identity crisis. How so?
The sources point to this really painful transition. Medicine has moved away from that revered identity, the physician healer,
The one who'd forget meals, stay late.
dedicated to saving lives as its own reward, yeah.
Yeah.
That whole ethos, it's shifted towards just being a healthcare worker, focused on market metrics maybe.
That shift must feel profound for those who entered under the old ideal.
It does. Your observation about the neurosurgeon abandoning a movie for an emergency.
Yeah.
Because saving the life was the reward.
That feels almost like a myth now, doesn't it? In the face of these market forces.
It does. And those market forces today are pushing doctors in 2 main directions: specialization and migration.
Specialization first. What's driving that?
It's driven almost entirely by the market. Private practice, corporate hospitals, they demand super specialists because that's where the higher billing potential is.
Young graduates feel they have to specialize immediately.
Increasingly, yes. It eclipses everything else. Research, teaching, things that used to define postgraduate excellence. They're secondary now to the urgency of monetizing that very expensive degree.
Which brings us to the cost again. How does that moral shift become a financial need? Is it the high fees forcing them into this machine?
It absolutely creates a compulsion, a necessity almost.
If you graduate with huge debt.
Or your family took on that debt, that 1 crore plus, you simply can't afford to go into low-paying public service or research. It's not financially viable.
So you're channeled straight into
Corporate environments. Big hospitals that offer the high earning potential needed to pay back that investment fast.
And those corporate hospitals themselves, they're built on massive costs.
Astronomical capital expenditure, CapEx. That's the term.
Give us a sense of scale. What does it cost to build one of these big, shiny hospitals?
We're talking huge numbers. Building a new, say, 500-bed, state-of-the-art corporate hospital, it can easily require an initial investment of 1,000 crores or more.
1,000 crores? That's over $1 billion.
Could be, yeah, depending on the scale and location and what drives that staggering cost.
Is it all medical equipment and beds?
Not even close. A huge chunk is often just real estate speculation, pure land cost. Yeah, one of the documents highlighted a hospital chain deal. The first 1,300 crores spent had nothing to do with medical quality. Zero.
So what was this for?
Buying prime land on a major road. Just securing the location. The sheer cost of the physical footprint.
And that creates this massive, inflexible debt burden for the hospital from day one.
Exactly. A huge weight they have to carry.
And that debt burden, it dictates how they operate, doesn't it?
It has to. If the hospital owes 1,000 crores, their primary need isn't necessarily noble healers.
Indeed.
A system optimized for rapid financial returns to service that debt.
So the structure itself demands sales.
Precisely. It demands a sales incentivized structure, as the sources put it, rather than a patient health incentivized structure. The main incentive shifts
From the doctor's oath?
to the hospital's quarterly profit and loss report.
And doctors get caught in this, even if they wanted to do the right thing initially.
They find themselves trapped in this vortex, facing sales pressures, targets, being forced, sometimes implicitly, sometimes explicitly, to act like salesmen.
To drive revenue for the hospital.
Yeah.
What does that actually look like? How do you sell healthcare?
It comes out as things like irrational prescription practices or unwarranted diagnostics,
Maybe.
ordering tests that aren't strictly needed, pushing for longer hospital stays, recommending procedures that have higher profit margins, even if a simpler option exists.
Especially when there's competition between hospitals.
Unhealthy competition, yeah. It fuels this behavior. The sources argue it creates this awful paradox. Doctors feel stuck worse than the patients.
Why worse?
Because they're trapped in a system with bad incentives, a system that forces them to potentially violate their own professional conscience just to meet targets. It causes real moral injury.
That clicks perfectly with your observation about professional behavior, comparing the NHS in the UK.
Where you saw empathetic, compassionate care from doctors and nurses.
And contrasting that with behavior you observed back in some Indian corporate hospitals.
It suggests the environment, the system's pressures might be the bigger factor than the individual doctor's inherent nature.
That's the core of it, isn't it? The system itself is flawed.
Deeply flawed. If your education is commercialized from the start and the place you work rewards profit above all else,
Then the system naturally produces specialists driven by financial returns, maybe by power.
and the result, as you observed, is patient pain, suffering in silence. Because the economic model has overridden the nobility, people are scared to challenge it.
Okay, so if the private sector is caught in this high capex, sales-driven cycle, what about the public sector? Is it a viable alternative?
Well, it's hamstrung by a completely different problem. Chronic, severe underinvestment.
How bad is it?
The data is pretty sobering. Government spending on health in India, it hovers around an abysmal 1.2% of GDP.
1.2%. How does that compare globally?
Dramatically low. You look at top-performing health systems, France, Germany, even the U.S., spends massively more as a percentage, though with its own issues. They're often in the 10% to 17% range.
So 1.2% versus 10% or more, that's a vast difference.
Huge. And this chronic underfunding, it's made worse by another major policy failure, a lack of data transparency.
What kind of data?
Basic health data. The Lancet Medical Journal actually criticized the government quite fiercely for this, for a systematic attempt to obscure through the lack of data.
Obscure, huh?
By delaying things. The 2021 census, for example, got postponed. Crucial regular surveys on morbidity, who gets sick with what, and out-of-pocket health spending. They're either delayed for years or the results just aren't publicly released.
Why is that so critical? Why does missing, say, a morbidity survey matter so much to the patient experience?
Because a morbidity survey tells you the ground truth. Who is getting sick, with what diseases, where they live, how often. Without that solid, open, recent data, health policy planning is basically flying blind.
You can't plan effectively.
You can't. You can't calculate insurance risks accurately. You can't forecast what kind of hospital beds or clinics are needed in specific districts. You certainly can't measure if any big national health scheme is actually working.
Like the Lancet asked.
How does the government even measure progress? How do they deploy resources effectively if the basic data on who's sick and what they're spending is hidden or missing?
It makes targeted, proactive healthcare almost impossible. Okay, so funding is low, data is scarce. Let's go back to the private hospital model for a second.
Yeah.
Even with all their investment, they seem inefficient for the patient.
Oh, incredibly frustratingly inefficient. That relentless focus on efficiency maximization and revenue maximization. It often creates a terrible patient experience.
Because their definition of efficiency isn't the patient's.
Exactly. It's about maximizing bed turnover, throughput. But it often translates into designs and processes that save the hospital money or time, not the patient.
Like the example you gave earlier, the person with a broken leg having to hobble all over the hospital.
Perfect example. Multiple floors for billing, then x-ray, then back for discharge papers. It's madness.
And discharge itself. Why does it take so long? 6 hours on a good day.
Often it's down to administrative centralization and sometimes just inefficient tech systems. But the centralization part is often strategic.
Strategic how? Not just bad planning.
It's often purely financial. Why do you have one central billing counter or estimate counter with massive queues?
Why?
Because the hospital usually lacks fixed pricing for procedures, since every single service, every drug, every bandage is calculated on the fly.
They need a dedicated department to crunch the numbers and give you a bill.
Right, which leads to bottlenecks and long waits. If they decentralized payment, let you pay at the pharmacy, pay at the x-ray desk, what would that mean for them?
More staff. More space for payment points.
Exactly. Costs they want to avoid. So they prioritize saving their money on admin staff over saving your time and frustration waiting in line for hours. The mindset is CapEx recovery first, patient convenience a distant second.
It's built-in inefficiency for the user. Now let's pivot to something counterintuitive. Drug prices.
Ah, yes, the paradox.
India actually has a big policy success here, right? Ensuring essential medicines are cheap.
Absolutely. This is a genuine strength. Indian laws, particularly around intellectual property, prioritize public health access.
How does that work?
The government basically has the power to threaten to override patents if drug companies don't make essential, life-saving drugs widely available and affordable.
So they can break a patent.
They can issue what's called a compulsory license, allowing generics to be made. It's been tested in court. Landmark cases basically said people's lives come before corporate profit margins.
So if a patented cancer drug costs, say, 1.5 lakh rupees.
But a generic version could be made for 5,000 rupees. India's laws ensure that access happens. It protects consumers from extreme price gouging on truly essential medicines.
Okay, so if the core essential drug price is controlled and often low, why is the overall cost of care still so incredibly high for patients? Where's the money going?
It's going into other things around the core drug. 2 key areas. Branded generics and, maybe even more significantly, something called trade generic.
Branded generics. That's just putting a brand name on a standard molecule to charge more.
Pretty much. Same chemical, fancier box, higher price. But trade generics, that's where the pricing game gets really subtle and impactful.
Explain that. How do trade generics work to inflate costs?
It's all about the margins given to the seller. The pharma company will offer incredibly high profit margins, the sources mentioned sometimes 70% or even more, to the pharmacy or the retailer to push their specific brand of a generic drug.
So the drug itself might be chemically cheap.
Exactly. The molecule might be off-patent and inexpensive, but the company isn't competing on the base price. They're competing by giving the seller a massive financial incentive.
So the pharmacist, or the hospital's own pharmacy,
is financially motivated by the drug company to sell you the high-margin trade generic, even if there's a perfectly good, much cheaper, government price-controlled generic alternative sitting right next to it on the shelf.
It shifts the cost burden and the whole incentive structure away from the regulated drug price.
Straight onto the patient's final bill. It bypasses the price control success by manipulating the supply chain incentives. Clever, but costly for the consumer.
Okay, so we've got commercialized education leading to debt-pressured doctors working in inefficient, sales-focused hospitals.
All underpinned by low public investment and patchy data.
It feels like all these systemic failures have to converge somewhere dangerous.
They do. And one of the most alarming consequences is the rise of antimicrobial resistance, AMR superbugs.
And the sources link this directly to the hospitals themselves.
Chillingly, yes. A recent major study pointed the finger squarely at hospitals, not just farms or the environment, as the key breeding grounds for the most dangerous, highly antibiotic-resistant superbugs.
Why hospitals specifically?
Because hospital strains are different, they're constantly exposed to multiple drugs, so they evolve to resist more of them. They become multi-drug resistant, and they're often capable of causing much more severe infections than the bugs you might pick up in the community.
This isn't just a local problem, is it? These bugs travel.
It's a global export crisis in some cases. We've seen extremely worrying strains emerge, like bacteria carrying the MCR1 gene.
What does that do?
It makes them resistant to colistin. That's an antibiotic often considered the absolute last resort, used only when nothing else works. And MCR1 has emerged in North Indian hospitals.
And then there's the New Delhi superbug.
The ND1 enzyme, yeah. That resistance mechanism spread incredibly fast. It's been detected in patients in over 70 countries now, originating from the region.
That points to a serious quality issue within the hospital system itself.
Undeniably. And you can measure that quality deficit quite starkly when you look at hospital-acquired infections, HAIs.
Like infections patients get after being admitted.
Exactly. Take ventilator-associated pneumonia, VAP. It's a common risk for patients on breathing machines.
Okay.
The pooled incidence rates for VAP in India, the average rates found across studies, are beyond the 90th percentile threshold when compared to U.S. benchmarks, like those from the CDC.
Beyond the 90th percentile, what does that mean in plain English?
It means that infection rates are higher than in 90% of comparable U.S. hospitals reporting their data. It indicates a severe, widespread problem with basic infection control. Statistically, your risk of getting VAP if you're ventilated in many facilities is alarmingly high.
That's a direct threat to patient safety, stemming from systemic failures.
Absolutely. And it links right back to the quality of training, the pressures on staff, the whole operational culture. Your point about observing quality, whether it's a doctor's focus or a nurse's care, these high VAP rates suggest the entire system's quality control is compromised.
Why is it so hard to fix? Why aren't things like antimicrobial stewardship programs, AMS, working effectively? These are programs designed to control antibiotic use.
The sources point to a bunch of barriers. It's complex.
Like what?
Sometimes it's unhealthy competition between doctors. Prescribing antibiotics might be seen as being proactive or giving the patient what they want, even if it's unnecessary.
So doctors might overprescribe to keep patients happy or appear decisive.
It can happen. There's often an absence of a real champion within the hospital to drive change. You need strong leadership. Regulatory systems can be dysfunctional or lack teeth.
And the patient plays a role too. You mentioned that earlier.
Yes, patient expectations are a big hurdle. Many people expect antibiotics. They feel they haven't received proper care unless they leave with an antibiotic prescription.
So they demand them.
That increases the pressure to prescribe, even when it's not clinically needed. And there's another factor. For smaller private hospitals especially, antibiotics can actually be a significant source of income.
Selling the drugs themselves.
Yes. So the financial incentive is still pushing towards more prescribing, directly fueling resistance instead of restraining it.
This brings us right back to the beginning, the quality of education, especially from colleges funded by those high capitation fees.
There's a real concern there. Public hospital systems, for all their faults, the underfunding, the crowds, they're often still seen as providing superior training quality. Because they're high-volume teaching hospitals, often still operating under some semblance of that older service ethos, trainees see a vast number of cases. Compared to the many private capitation fee medical colleges that have mushroomed, as one source put it, the worry is they might be producing specialists who haven't had the same rigorous discipline training needed for top-quality care, including robust infection control.
So the listener's observation that the future of healthcare seems to be handed over to specialists, driven more by financial returns and power.
It feels grimly validated by these outcomes. High infection rates, spreading superbugs. This quality deficit leads directly back to that patient pain and silent suffering. The system designed to heal is, in some ways, contributing to the harm.
Okay, we've painted a pretty bleak picture. A system seemingly designed for failure, prioritizing debt recovery over patient well-being. How do we even start to fix this mess?
The sources don't just diagnose the problem, they do point towards solutions. Two core ideas come through strongly: using technology for decentralization and applying rigorous systemization to how healthcare is managed and governed.
Let's start with delivery. Decentralization.
Right. The sheer astronomical cost of building and running those traditional massive hospitals is actually forcing innovation. It has to.
How so?
The whole healthcare paradigm is shifting. It's moving beyond the hospital walls. Home healthcare is booming.
Why? Just convenience.
Cost, primarily. It's dramatically cheaper. Care delivered at home is roughly 1/3 the cost of an average hospital day.
1/3. That's huge.
It is. You might be comparing, say, $1,100 a day for advanced home care versus $3,000 a day or more in a hospital for similar monitoring or treatment.
And technology makes this possible now in ways it wasn't before.
Absolutely. Telemedicine is exploding. Sophisticated remote monitoring devices, wearables, sensors that feed data back to clinical teams.
Virtual doctor visits.
Even things like virtual reality headsets or specialized pods for remote consultations. All of this is drastically cutting the need for expensive hospital readmissions or even initial visits for chronic condition management.
So companies are actually sending nurses into homes now.
Yes, highly skilled nurses doing comprehensive checks, drawing blood, providing patient education, tasks that used to require a clinic visit or even an ER trip. The financial pressure away from high-cost hospitals is driving genuinely patient-focused tech solutions. It's making care more proactive, more personalized.
Okay, so technology is enabling cheaper, decentralized care delivery. What about the governance side? You mentioned systemization.
This is crucial, and it speaks directly to the core goal you mentioned, empowering people with knowledge.
So they can reclaim their free will, make informed choices.
Exactly. So vulnerable people aren't just taken for a ride by an opaque system. But achieving that requires discipline. It requires feedback loops, things often missing in impulsive top-down policymaking.
How do you build that discipline?
One framework highlighted in the sources is borrowed from quality management, often used in software development. It's the Plan-Do Check Act cycle, PDCA.
PDCA. Okay, break that down. How would that apply to fixing healthcare policy?
Right. Plan is the first step. Define your objectives clearly, based on solid data and analysis. Predict outcomes, set measurable goals. Don't just announce a vague policy.
Done, dodo.
Implement the plan, but maybe not nationwide overnight. Maybe in a controlled, test-driven way first. Pilot projects. Learn as you go.
Then check. This sounds important.
Critically important. This is the validation phase. Are you actually meeting the goals you set in the plan phase? And crucially, you need to surface the data that proves success or failure. Make it transparent.
And then finally, act.
Act is about reflecting on what the check phase told you. What worked, what didn't. You refine the process based on that evidence, and then the cycle begins again. Continuous improvement.
The sources suggest that in government policy, often the check and act phases just don't happen.
Or they happen years later based on outdated data, after millions have been spent. PDCA forces a much tighter, more responsive loop. Applied to health, it means prioritizing system resilience, sustained investment based on evidence, not just splashy announcements.
How does PDCA empower me, the patient, trying to choose a hospital?
That's a great connection. For the patient, PDCA translates into a demand for transparency. If a hospital is truly using system thinking, applying something like PDCA internally,
Then they should have data.
they should. You, the consumer, should be able to check their performance. Ask them, what are your infection rates for this procedure? What's your average discharge time? What is the fixed cost for my surgery?
Demanding those metrics.
That's how you reclaim your free will, by making decisions based on validated performance data, which a good system should generate, not just on marketing brochures or reputation.
Okay, so system thinking and governance. Are there actual alternative models of hospitals emerging that embody this, that decouple care from pure profit?
Yes, there are. One interesting concept mentioned is the fixed cost, tech-efficient hospital model, sometimes called superhealth.
What's different about it?
It tackles that massive capex problem head-on, the debt burden we talked about.
How?
Instead of building huge, brand-new, super expensive hospitals over 5 or more years, this model focuses on leasing and renovating existing commercial buildings. Much faster, much cheaper.
Using technology to speed that up. You mentioned BIM.
Right, building information modeling, BIM. It's basically a collaborative digital blueprint. Architects, engineers, builders all work on the same 3D model simultaneously.
What's the benefit?
It dramatically cuts down on design clashes, errors, and construction time. Using BIM, these models aim to renovate and open a facility in maybe 120 days, not 5 years.
Okay, 120 days versus 5 years.
Yeah.
And leasing versus buying prime real estate?
It slashes the initial capital outlay, it cuts down the debt dramatically, and if you don't have that massive debt hanging over you,
The whole incentive structure can change.
completely. These models typically operate with doctors on full-time salaries. No commission.
So the surgeon doesn't get a 20% cut for doing more operations.
Exactly. The incentive is purely for quality care, good outcomes, maybe efficiency in the right way, not just sales volume.
And they offer fixed costs.
That's key. They offer fixed upfront prices for procedures, say $6 for an appendix surgery, $1 for a knee replacement, and the hospital absorbs the risk if your case turns out to be more complex,
That provides certainty for the patient. Transparency.
which is almost non-existent in the current fee-for-service maze. It fundamentally changes the relationship.
Finally, let's touch on the workforce again, especially for rural areas where doctors don't want to go.
Right, the maldistribution. The sources strongly suggest we need to shift away from relying solely on the expensive, highly specialized, doctor-centric model, especially for primary care.
What's the alternative?
Empowering other health professionals, nurses, physician assistants, other allied health workers, give them higher clinical skills, broader scope of practice.
Why them specifically?
Their training is shorter, it's less expensive, it's generally less hyper-competitive to get into training programs. All this makes them much better suited and often more willing to serve in rural or underserved communities.
They can handle many primary care needs.
Absolutely. Many diagnostic and basic treatment roles currently guarded by doctors could be safely and effectively performed by well-trained nurse practitioners or similar roles. It creates a more resilient, decentralized workforce that's far more likely to actually go where the need is greatest, instead of everyone clustering in big cities near the high capex hospitals. Hashtag tag tag outro.
So this deep dive, it's really laid bare how that noble foundation of medicine, of medical education,
We're cracked under the weight of money. Financialization.
accelerated by governance failures, by resistance from powerful interests.
Yeah. And the result is the system we see now, often high cost, high infection risk, where compassion and quality sometimes feel sacrificed for the bottom line, for quarterly returns.
A system obsessed with recouping debt, maximizing revenue, sometimes forgetting the patient in the process.
Yeah. It feels that way, doesn't it? But the sources, importantly, they don't just leave us there. They do offer hope. Through knowledge, through structural change.
The fight isn't just political then, it's about information.
It's hugely about knowledge and transparency. When patients like you, listening, are armed with clear information about fixed costs, about whether a test is truly necessary, about quality metrics like infection rates.
And when the system itself is redesigned.
Structurally redesigned to prioritize care over paying back massive land debt. That's when we start to systemize healthcare properly. That's when we protect the vulnerable from being exploited.
We can't undo the past decisions, the history that led here, the erosion of trust.
No, the past is past. But we can demand transparency now. We can support and build these alternative models using tech, using frameworks like PDCA, pushing for fixed costs.
The goal being reclaiming that free will, making informed choices.
Yes, whether it's choosing home health care or demanding cost transparency from a hospital, it's about building a path forward where future generations maybe experience healthcare with tears of relief, not suffering and frustration.
So here's a final thought to leave everyone with. Accountability seems key to fixing system failures, right?
Absolutely essential.
And we often hear about the U.S. healthcare system. It spends a massive amount, 17% of GDP, roughly. Yet it consistently ranks quite low in citizen satisfaction compared to other developed nations.
That's true. High spending doesn't guarantee good outcomes or happy patients.
So should policymakers, not just in India but globally, maybe stop instinctively trying to copy these very high-cost, often inefficient Western models?
And instead,
Should they maybe embrace these decentralized, tech-enabled, fixed-price models we've discussed, models that seem to put patient experience and genuine transparency front and center?
it raises that fundamental question, doesn't it? Is sky-high spending proof of quality healthcare? Or is it sometimes just proof of a structurally broken, inefficient system? Something to think about.